In early 2026, the world felt tense but familiar. In Tehran, shopkeepers opened their doors under a gray haze of morning traffic. In New York, commuters packed into subways, scrolling through the usual headlines of diplomatic spats and regional saber rattling. For millions of people, it was just another day. Global tensions were like a constant hum in the background of modern life, a noise the world had just gotten used to. Nobody was really prepared for that silence to be broken. Nobody was ready for the moment the talk became real, when the decades-long shadow war between the United States and Iran would finally, catastrophically, burst into the light. The buildup had been happening in plain sight for months. After a brutal crackdown on the largest protests in Iran since its 1979 revolution, the United States, led by a returning President Donald Trump, kicked off the largest military buildup in the Middle East since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. Warships sliced through the Arabian Sea, and heavy bombers traced arcs across the sky. Still, even as all the pieces were moving into place, there was a fragile hope for diplomacy. On February 25, 2026, Iran's foreign minister said a historic agreement was within reach. The world held its breath, hoping the fever would break. It didn't. Then, at 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the same news alert flashes across every screen on the planet. The formal announcement doesn't come from a press briefing room, but from a social media post by the President of the United States. Operation Epic Fury has been launched. The first wave of strikes isn't just targeting military bases, it's a decapitation strike. The target? Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. He's assassinated in a coordinated U.S.-Israeli attack. In that single blinding flash, the decades of proxy battles, sanctions, and covert ops are over. Something new, and something far more terrifying, has just begun. What happens next isn't some distant conflict. It's a minute-by-minute breakdown of the military bloodbath and economic apocalypse that would swallow the globe. This is what actually happens when the United States goes to war with Iran. On February 28, 2026, the storm finally breaks. At around 9:45 a.m. local time in Iran, the skies are torn open. This isn't a limited surgical strike, it's a blitzkrieg designed to shatter the very foundation of the regime. Over the first 12 hours, the United States and Israel unleashed nearly 900 airstrikes. The mission, codenamed Operation Epic Fury by the U.S. and Operation Roaring Lion by Israel, has brutally clear goals. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth declares the mission is laser-focused: destroy Iranian offensive missiles, destroy Iranian missile production, destroy their navy and other security infrastructure, and they will never have nuclear weapons. The initial targets are the head of the snake. The strike that kills Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei is just the beginning. Dozens of other senior Iranian officials are eliminated in that opening salvo. The attack is a textbook example of modern warfare, using a symphony of advanced weapons. Stealth bombers, totally invisible to Iranian radar, deliver payloads to hardened command and control bunkers. Cruise missiles, launched from warships in the Persian Gulf and Arabian Sea, fly low and fast, striking with devastating precision. Israeli fighter jets, some of the most advanced in the world, join the attack, hitting targets deep inside Iranian territory. The goal is pure chaos. It's to create a power vacuum so complete that the regime's ability to command its forces just evaporates. The headquarters of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, are turned to rubble. Key nuclear sites, which were already damaged in a smaller conflict back in 2025, are hit again to make sure Iran's path to a bomb is permanently cut off. The strikes go after Iran's strategic depth, its vast and scattered ballistic missile facilities, naval bases along the coast, and the factories that produce its deadly drones. In Tehran, the initial shock gives way to panic and confusion. The state that for 47 years was defined by the absolute authority of one man is now, suddenly, headless. For the US and Israel, the first few hours look like a stunning tactical success. But they've just kicked a hornet's nest the size of a nation, and the swarm is about to rise. Iran, though decapitated and reeling, doesn't collapse. It lashes out with the fury of a cornered animal. The regime's military strategy was never about beating the United States in a head-to-head fight. It was always about deterrence through pain, a strategy built to inflict such unbearable damage on its enemies that they'd be forced to back down. Now, that strategy is unleashed in its most terrifying form. Within hours of the first strikes, Iran's response begins. It's a torrent of fire unlike anything the region has ever seen. Over 500 ballistic missiles and more than 2,000 suicide drones are launched in a massive coordinated barrage. The target list is a map of American power all across the Middle East. U.S. military bases in Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE are hammered. Even bases as far away as Jordan and a British facility in Cyprus are struck. The night sky over the Gulf is lit up by interceptor missiles and the fiery plumes of incoming warheads. But the sheer volume is overwhelming. Defenses are saturated. For every missile that's shot down, others get through. The first U.S. casualty reports begin to trickle in. A tanker crash over Iraq kills American service members, and hundreds more are wounded across the region from missile impacts on sprawling bases. This is Iran showing off its most prized military asset, the largest and most diverse ballistic missile arsenal in the Middle East, built for exactly this moment. It includes weapons like the solid-fueled Khaybar-Shakan and the hypersonic Fatah missiles, designed to be faster and harder to intercept. At the same time, Iran's proxies jump into the fight. In Lebanon, Hezbollah's rockets begin to rain down on northern Israel. In Yemen, the Houthis launch missiles toward the Red Sea. In Iraq, militias target U.S. facilities. The war is no longer contained within Iran's borders. It has exploded across the entire region. Iran's message is clear. If the regime is going down, it's going to try and take the entire Middle East with it. The Iranian retaliation, while devastating, does exactly what its planners feared it would. It removes any and all restraints on American military action. The goal shifts from a simple decapitation strike to the systematic annihilation of Iran's ability to fight back. What happens over the next 3 weeks is a relentless, overwhelming display of American air and sea power. U.S. Central Command, or CENTCOM, carries out Operation Epic Fury with methodical brutality. The target list grows exponentially. Admiral Brad Cooper, the CENTCOM commander, lays out the mission: obliterate Iran's navy, wipe out its missile and drone forces, and cut off its ability to supply its proxies. The numbers that come out of this phase of the war are staggering. By mid-March, U.S. and Israeli forces have struck over 7,800 targets across Iran. The Iranian Navy is effectively erased. More than 120 of its ships, from large frigates to small fast attack boats, are sent to the bottom of the Persian Gulf. Naval bases are left as cratered ruins. The skies, once filled with Iranian drones and missiles, start to clear. U.S. intelligence reports that Iranian missile launches drop by 90% and drone attacks fall by 95%. The huge industrial parks that built these weapons are systematically destroyed, with CENTCOM reporting that over 2/3 of Iran's missile, drone, and naval production facilities are gone. The cost is immense. The first few weeks of the campaign cost the U.S. an estimated $18 billion, and the Trump administration immediately asks Congress for another $200 billion to keep the operation going. Tactically, you can't argue with the results. Admiral Cooper declares the operation a well-defined success. Iran is being pummeled, its conventional forces are crippled, it's forced to ration what's left of its missile arsenal, firing only 20 to 30 per day, a pale shadow of its initial barrage. From a purely military standpoint, America is dominating. But war isn't fought on a spreadsheet of destroyed targets. It's also fought in the real world, where a different kind of war, one targeting the global economy itself, is just getting started. The real weapon in this war isn't a hypersonic missile. It's a narrow strip of water just 21 miles across, the Strait of Hormuz. In response to the overwhelming U.S. assault, Iran does what the world has been dreading for 50 years. It closes the strait. The IRGC declares the waterway closed to any ship traveling to or from the ports of the U.S. and its allies. They start targeting ships and laying mines. The effect is instant and catastrophic. The Strait of Hormuz is the planet's most critical energy choke point. Roughly 20% of the world's daily oil consumption, about 20 million barrels a day, flows through this single passage. It also handles nearly 20% of global liquefied natural gas, LNG. When it closes, the engine of the global economy seizes up. The market reaction is violent. Brent crude oil, which was trading around $73 a barrel before the war, surges past $100, then $120. Analysts warn that if the closure lasts, oil could hit $150 or even $200 a barrel. For the average person, the impact is immediate and painful. Gas prices in the United States could jump to $5, $7, or even higher. But the pain doesn't stop at the pump. Energy is a basic cost for everything. The price of producing and shipping food skyrockets, leading to rapid inflation at the grocery store. Global supply chains, already fragile, are thrown into complete chaos. Major shipping lines suspend all traffic through the Gulf, creating backlogs that would take months to clear. The International Energy Agency calls it the most severe supply disruption in the history of the global energy market. This isn't just an economic downturn, it's a full-blown global crisis. Economists warn of 1970s-style stagflation, that toxic mix of zero growth and high inflation. A prolonged closure could trigger a deep global recession. The GDP of Gulf nations and Israel could shrink by over 10%. The United Nations estimates the war could wipe out nearly $200 billion in economic growth across the Middle East. While the U.S. military is winning the tactical battle, Iran has just opened a second front. And on this economic battlefield, the whole world is a casualty. While the global economy teeters on the brink, another of Iran's long-term strategies plays out on the ground. It's the concept of horizontal escalation, carried out by its network of allies and proxies known as the Axis of Resistance. This alliance was built over decades through funding, training, and shared ideology, and it was designed for this exact moment. It's an informal coalition that lets Iran project power, bog down its enemies, and fight a war on multiple fronts without having to directly face American forces everywhere. The Axis isn't one single army, but a diverse web of groups. Hezbollah in Lebanon. This is the crown jewel of the Axis. Hezbollah is more than a militia. It's a powerful political force with an arsenal of over 150,000 rockets and missiles. They're the most capable and battle-hardened of all of Iran's proxies. In this war, they open a major second front against Israel, forcing the Israeli military to divide its attention and resources. The fighting turns southern Lebanon into a devastating war zone and displaces over 1 million people. The Houthis in Yemen. Controlling much of western Yemen and its Red Sea coastline, the Houthis have sophisticated long-range missiles and drones from Iran. They don't just add to the missile threat against Israel and the Gulf states. They threaten another critical choke point, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, where a huge amount of global shipping passes to and from the Suez Canal. Their attacks on commercial ships pour gasoline on the economic fire started in Hormuz. Militias in Iraq and Syria. For years, a collection of Iran-backed militias have operated in the chaos of Iraq and Syria. Groups like the Popular Mobilization Forces in Iraq become a persistent, deadly threat to the thousands of U.S. troops stationed across both countries. They launch a steady stream of drone, rocket, and mortar attacks, creating a low-level grinding conflict that drains U.S. resources and morale. This is Iran's asymmetric genius. It knows it can't win a conventional war, so instead it makes the battlefield bigger, raises the cost for everyone, and turns a direct conflict into a regional quagmire. The US and Israel might own the skies over Iran, but on the ground, they're now fighting a multi-headed hydra, a spiderweb of conflicts designed to bleed them slowly. A war this big doesn't happen in a vacuum. It forces the entire world to react, compelling nations to choose sides and revealing the true balance of power. Russia and China. For Moscow and Beijing, the war is a strategic gift. They get to watch as their main global rival, the United States, gets tangled up in another costly Middle Eastern war. The chaos in energy markets is great for Russia, a major oil and gas exporter. To calm down spiking oil prices, the U.S. is even forced into the humiliating position of easing some sanctions on Russian oil. Both Russia and China can play the part of mediator while quietly giving diplomatic cover and maybe even material support to Iran, helping bog America down even further. U.S. allies in the Gulf. The Gulf Arab states, especially Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar, are on the absolute front line. Their cities and their multi-trillion-dollar economic projects are direct targets for Iranian missiles. They host the U.S. bases that are essential for the war, but they're also paying a huge economic price. The war forces them to make a choice: abandon their recent attempts to engage with Iran and go all in with the American security guarantee, which is the only thing that can protect them. Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, is reportedly urging President Trump to continue and even intensify the war. Europe. Europe finds itself a victim of the conflict, mostly powerless to do anything about it. Economically dependent on stable energy and having outsourced its security to the U.S. for decades, European nations get hit hard by the economic shock. They face a surge in inflation and a potential recession, all while dealing with the humanitarian fallout of millions of displaced people from the Middle East. The crisis exposes Europe's lack of military power and energy independence. The humanitarian catastrophe. The human cost is just staggering. Beyond the thousands of military casualties, it's civilians who bear the heaviest burden. A strike on a girls' school next to a naval base in Iran kills 170 people in the first few hours. The fighting in Lebanon displaces a huge part of the country's population. Waves of refugees destabilize neighboring countries, and the economic collapse plunges millions into poverty across the entire region. After weeks of devastating war, a strange and unsettling reality starts to set in. On paper, the United States has won. Operation Epic Fury achieved its main military goals. Iran's navy is at the bottom of the Gulf, its air force is grounded, and its ability to build missiles and drones is in ruins. President Trump can and does declare victory, but the war isn't over. In fact, it might have just begun. The core problem haunting the White House and the Pentagon is the ghost of past wars, Iraq and Afghanistan. A full-scale ground invasion and occupation of Iran, a country 4 times the size of Iran with a population of nearly 90 million, is seen as a strategic nightmare. The Pentagon moves Marine Expeditionary Units and parts of the 82nd Airborne to the region to give the president maximum optionality, but there is zero public appetite for putting hundreds of thousands of American boots on the ground. This creates a paradox. Without a ground invasion, how do you achieve the ultimate political goal of regime change? The administration hopes the devastating air campaign will inspire the Iranian people to rise up and take back their government. And protests do erupt, fueled by the chaos and the death of the supreme leader. But there's no guarantee they'll succeed. A crippled authoritarian regime can still cling to power through sheer brutality, or it could just be replaced by an even more hardline faction of the IRGC. This is where Iran's strategy of endurance kicks in. The regime weathers the initial storm. It may have lost its heavy industry, but it still has a vast, hidden arsenal of missiles in underground missile cities. U.S. intelligence estimates that even after a month of non-stop bombing, only about a third of Iran's total missile arsenal has been destroyed. The regime can keep fighting a low-level war of attrition forever, using its remaining missiles and proxy forces to bleed American interests and sow chaos. The conflict shifts from a high-intensity war into a long, grinding, and unwinnable struggle. Victory is declared, but peace never comes. The tactical win becomes a strategic quagmire. We are living through a moment where the tectonic plates of global power are shifting right under our feet. This analysis is just the beginning. The situation on the ground, the economic fallout, and the geopolitical chess moves are changing by the hour. If you think this kind of in-depth, unfiltered analysis is crucial for understanding the world we live in, then hit that like button to help us reach more people. Make sure you subscribe and turn on all notifications, because we're committed to bringing you the updates that often get overlooked. This is a conversation, and we want to hear from you. What do you think the real endgame is here? Is a stable outcome even possible? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. So, what actually happens if the US goes to war with Iran? The answer is complicated and brutal. The United States achieves a swift and stunning tactical victory, crushing Iran's conventional military with its overwhelming technological power. But this victory comes at an almost unbearable price. The global economy is thrown into a crisis that rivals the worst shocks of the 20th century, inflicting pain on every household on the planet. The Middle East is set on fire, not in one single contained conflict, but in a dozen interlocking wars from Lebanon to Yemen, creating a humanitarian disaster of epic proportions. And the war itself doesn't end. It just changes form, shifting from a clear-cut military campaign into a murky, endless struggle against a web of proxies. A war fought with suicide drones in the desert and cyber attacks on critical infrastructure. The gamble of Operation Epic Fury was for a quick knockout blow that would cause the regime to collapse. Instead, it may have locked the United States and the world into a new and terrifying era of conflict. An era where victory is declared, but the fighting never stops. An era where the cost of winning is so high, it feels exactly like defeat. The final bill for this war is still being calculated, and it will be paid not for years, but for generations to come.